So today I'm going to show you how I made this tour poster. So just to give a little bit of background information, currently I'm taking a poster design course, and one of the assignments was to create a tour poster for a band that you like. Knocked Loose is a band that I really enjoy, and they kind of fit within the style of design that I like to do, so I thought it would be a good fit between something that I like to do and the type of bands that I would like to work with. So to be completely transparent, this is not something that they commissioned me to do. This is just something that I was doing for an assignment, for fun, and just to kind of do something and try something else, just so I can learn a little bit more about that process and hopefully put it into my portfolio so maybe I can get hired to do it in the future. But with that out of the way, let's get to designing. All right, so on Knocked Loose's most recent cover for their most recent singles, there's this art shape, and I kind of wanted to play around with something like that. That way it would kind of tie in the new single with this new tour poster design. I was using some of the lyrics from the release as inspiration, and some of it talked about thrones and kings, and so I thought about trying to use that imagery as much as I possibly could. Unfortunately, I was trying to blend these two pictures together, and they just really weren't working, which is partially my fault for choosing two photos that were just so drastically different, but also because I just really didn't want to put in the time to really try to match them. So I dropped that idea and came up with something else. And I found this image of a skull with a crown, so I thought it would kind of fit perfectly in with that theme that they have going on in some of their songs. And I figured I would be able to do something cool with it. So my first idea was to play around with these halftone effects. I thought that might be an interesting way to kind of give it a gritty kind of punk look that I think would look really cool for a tour poster. But the way that I did it, I could also add some color in, so that way I could create some visual hierarchy throughout the image. Ultimately, I didn't really like the look of the halftone effect on the skull. I thought it was cool, but it just didn't really make sense for the poster. So I kind of just set it aside, and I knew I could use it for something later, so if you wait till the end of the video, you'll see how I ended up using it. So anyways, I just started working with the image as an image instead of trying to make it into this kind of halftone effect. I added one of the gradients that I really like using, and this kind of halftone texture that I like to use a lot. And then from there, what I really wanted to do was just lock in the band name and make that look good, as well as make sure that it fits the rest of the aesthetic for the poster design. And then again, I came back to messing with that arch shape. In my mind, I thought there was a cool way that I could frame up the skull, and I thought that shape would be a perfect way to do it. It would also be a nice callback to their most recent cover. And then actually, while making this, I had a bright idea to use some design elements by Design Syndrome. If you haven't heard of him, make sure you look him up on Instagram. He does a lot of great work, and he has a lot of great free assets. So I actually pulled some of his assets to use in this poster because I knew that I would be able to use them in a really cool way. And without those design assets, I definitely wouldn't have been able to make this design look as cool as it did at the end. But then I had to go through the trouble of figuring out what I wanted to put in that art shape, and then how I wanted to affect the photo that would be going into that art shape. And I spent a lot of time just kind of experimenting, trying to figure out what to do. I feel like I had an idea in my head, but just nothing really clicked. So I actually ended up just scrapping that idea and taking out that photograph and just having the kind of borders that kind of made up that shape. And then from there, I just kind of retrofitted it to fit the skull a little bit more snugly. I felt like it was a little bit too wide before, so I just kind of brought the sides in, so that way it kind of fit the shape of the skull a little bit better than before. Which I definitely think that was the right call. I think having the photo behind the skull was a little bit too much, and it was just going to get lost in the chaos of everything else. But once I had the imagery where I wanted it, then it was time to focus on the typography and make the band name stand out and look cool. But really my goal with messing with the typography in this way was just to make it look a little bit less digital and typed out. So I used some of these grungy, paintery kind of paint brushes that I have, and I was just looking for ways that I could kind of accent the letters or kind of make it look like there was a slip of the brush or there were some paint splatters, or just making it look a little bit less digital and trying to make it look a little bit more realistic and analog. But once I had that in a place that I was pretty happy with, I could move on with adding the dates and figuring out some of the more informational parts of the tour poster. So right here, I'm just trying to lay out some dates, states, and cities, so that way I could figure out how I wanted to lay out all the information on the page. Originally, I thought I was going to do 2 columns, but I ended up scrapping that and ended up going with just the 1. But once I had all that information kind of laid out in a way that I was happy with, I ended up going back to the typography of the band name because I wasn't really sure if I was happy with it or not. So I really just wanted to go through another idea that I had that I thought also might work. So that way I could compare the 2 ideas and figure out which one I liked better. And just like the last time, added some paintbrush strokes and stuff like that, just to make it look a little bit more analog and not so digital. So once I had all of that done, I had most of the poster design done. Really from here, it was just figuring out small details and then just seeing if there was anything else that I wanted to add or anything different that I wanted to kind of change. But really at this point, 75% of the poster is done, and I'm just trying to make sure that I can make it as good as I possibly can. Also, in their most recent cover art, they have these kind of circles with some images in it, so I thought I could also kind of do a callback to that by adding some circles with images inside of them on the side, but I just didn't really like the layout of it. I felt it too cluttered, and I couldn't really move them around much, so I ended up scrapping that. And then here's where I ended up changing it to a single column. I felt like the bottom was a little bit too empty, so I wanted to add some photography to the bottom, but having one column type and then one column photograph didn't really feel right. So what I ended up doing was moving all that information to the center, and on the sides of that information, adding in the photography afterward. Ultimately, I think this was the best choice. And then one of the last things that I wanted to do, because there was so much white on the bottom because of those pictures and the way that I added the effects to them, I thought it was a little bit too white, so I wanted to add just a little pop of color. So I added a little bit more of those kind of paint splats and brush strokes just to make it feel a little bit more grungy and kind of add some color into those photos. And then after adding on some final textures, the very last thing that I did was actually go back to the original typography for the band name that I had, and then I added a slight effect to it. Depending on when this video comes out, I'm either planning on releasing a tutorial for how to get this effect, or it'll already be on my channel and you can look at it. But either way, I think this last adjustment was a really good idea, and I think it ended up helping me in the long run. And so here's the final result. So this is actually the very first tour poster that I've ever designed. So there was a lot of aspects of the design that I wasn't really quite sure about. And so really I just had to take a lot of time to figure out exactly how I wanted to lay out everything, so that way I could get all the information on the poster and still make it look aesthetically pleasing. Overall, I'm really happy with how this design came out. I had a lot of fun making it and experimenting with some different things and some different assets that I don't typically use. But I also think it works really well as a portfolio piece, because it is something that I would like to make, or something that I would typically make. And so it's a good way to kind of showcase of what I'm capable of doing in my own style for a client. And I mentioned earlier in my design process that I wanted to take another concept that I was kind of working on and use it for a different purpose. And so I have a little bit of a bonus design for you guys. So I ended up taking that kind of half-tone skull that I had made earlier and turning it into a shirt design that would go along with the poster. The way that I had designed it earlier, I didn't really think it would work super well as a poster design, but the way that I was looking at it, I thought it would go perfectly well with the poster that I ended up designing, but as a t-shirt design. So I really didn't have to do too much more work, and in the end, I got two different things instead of just the one. But really, I was just trying to kind of mimic the aesthetic and the look of the poster, but kind of transferring it into a shirt design, but making it look unique enough so it wasn't just a copy and paste. If I was doing this for an actual client, I would probably take a little bit more time with the shirt design. I do think it could be improved a little bit. I don't have anything specific right now that I would do, but I do think that it could be better than it is right now. But thinking about how much work and effort I put into the shirt design, I think it came out pretty well. And if I was working for a client, I think this would actually be a good first draft to show them. But leave a comment below about what you think of these designs. Is it good? Is it bad? Could I have done better? Would you have done something differently? Let me know. But if you found this video helpful or entertaining at all, I'd appreciate it if you would check out the rest of my channel and then consider subscribing. I hope to see you in the next video.